everyone. I hope that we will have a short special session today. The reason why it will be a short special session today is we need to observe a quiet period with regard to the state's finances. That means today, as we go into special session, we are in a quiet period because we sold bonds yesterday. We cannot pass bills that have an impact on the state's general fund or the state's indebtedness. We do expect to pass one bill of significance, and that will spend some of the federal CARES Act money. And it is a bill that the Minnesota Senate has passed, I believe, twice and sent over to us. And we've been able to reach agreement on funding day services for people with disabilities. So that is a bill that will pass today, we expect. And then there may be some other technical cleanup items that we're able to get done. But what we hope is that we'll be able to break through the House GOP opposition to passing a bonding bill and come back and do that in September. I think everybody's really clear that Minority Leader Dowd has two concerns that are, I think, sincere and heartfelt. He's very concerned about the deficit going forward, I think, as all of us are. He's also concerned about the governor's continued use of emergency power. And has tied those things to the bonding bill. My hope is that between now and when we come back in September is that we can get the minority leader to untie those issues. We can make progress on the deficit. We can make progress on the governor's executive authority and address some of the minority leader's concerns, but hopefully we can work together to pass this tremendous economic stimulus for the state of Minnesota, these very needed local projects and jobs in the bonding bill. There are 49 of 50 governors in the United States of America that have emergency powers right now. The president has declared a national state of emergency. The emergency continues. We don't have any indication that the president of the United States is planning to end the national emergency anytime soon. And those 49 of 50 governors continue to exercise those powers. And in the state of Wisconsin, it's the Commissioner of Public Health that is still exercising emergency powers. The pandemic is not done with our country yet. We need to get control of the virus so that we can get to a point where we can get things restarted and rebound and get some economic growth. But we're not there yet. And for that reason, the governor needs to continue to have this emergency authority to make fast decisions and move resources quickly. So with that, I would turn it over to the Majority Leader.
Good morning. Yes, we are now starting our third special session of the summer, required by law because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We still have unfinished business at the legislature, and in many ways, the minority caucus in the Minnesota House, the Republicans, have the state tied in knots by tying those two issues together, by tying COVID-19 and jobs together, and holding both back because they aren't satisfied with the executive power changes that they would like to see. And as you look at the election year heating up, the public is overwhelmingly concerned, as they should be, about COVID-19 and about how the economy recovers. And as we move closer to an election year, I think it's time for all of us to show that we can actually govern, whether that is Speaker Pelosi and the President Trump in Washington or Kurt Dowd here in Minnesota. People who cannot get deals done to serve the public don't deserve to have the public's confidence, and that's what we are focused on. We need to pass a robust bonding bill so that there is a construction pipeline of jobs coming up. We need to pass a supplemental budget so that we aren't laying off large numbers of corrections officers and closing down plants and facilities. We need to ensure that personal care attendants who are taking care of vulnerable people at a time of COVID are able to get the temporary pay increase necessary to keep them coming into work. And there are just there are a high level of issues that are critical to jobs and the economy all around Minnesota. And we cannot surrender on COVID-19 as the price for creating jobs and doing what we can economically. So we have to cut the knot in September that we are tied in right now by the House Minority Leader. And we need to make sure that we are delivering for the people of Minnesota, because in the 2020 election year, I think it's becoming very clear that the public has no tolerance for incompetence, and they shouldn't.
With that, I think we're happy to answer questions, and we'll let Ted read those because my old age and inability to read them in the chat.
I think our first one was Mary LaHammer. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, so each of you, if you could, Madam Speaker, and Majority Leader Winkler, you both alluded to it. Are we getting too close to the election and the campaign politics to really get anything done in any of these special sessions at this point?
I don't think so. Most Minnesotans don't really, I think, know too much what a bonding bill is and don't base their electoral decisions on it. And so, I've had several conversations with Minority Leader Doubt and the Senate Majority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader. Voters are not going to make their decision for or against a candidate based on whether a bonding bill passes or not. We know this from electoral contests in the past, but we all know as leaders that it is good for the state of Minnesota. We know there's plenty of ammunition for us to go to the election and beat each other up about. We will be very hard on their candidates for not being for climate action, for not wanting to address gun violence prevention, for not wanting to give people paid family and medical leave. But given all that, and they can beat us up for wanting to raise revenue that we proposed in the last biennium, but we could work together and get a bonding bill done and not affect any of our electoral arguments against each other. I think we can find common ground and get that done. And I think because of the pandemic and the economic impact on the state, it's critically important that we do it.
If I can jump in though, can't they make any majority party, can a minority party make a majority party look bad by failing to pass a bonding bill and not delivering those local projects that constituents want?
It's just never played out that way. And I think that Representative Doubt is sincerely concerned about the deficit and executive power. And I don't think he wants to deprive the people of greater Minnesota, the people of the metro area of these important infrastructure projects. I think he has getting to the point where he has exhausted every avenue to make his points on executive authority. But I don't think that he wants to stand in the way of important projects for the state of Minnesota just to score political points. I think he believes in the power of a bonding bill. He has been part of passing good bonding bills, and he has been part of bonding bills failing. And I don't think he wishes to repeat that.
I would just say I think the election looming closer actually adds pressure to getting these things done, because a lot of these are about local projects and communities where people may start to pay more attention. We're seeing very high turnout. We're seeing a lot of focus on election. And I think that especially on the bonding bill, which is also connected to some tax changes, there are a lot of rural economies and parts of greater Minnesota that would benefit tremendously from getting this passed. And I think the election pressure will actually push those members of the state house farther towards getting this deal done.
Can I follow up quick? What did you learn from the turnout last night? And how does that affect, the politics going forward here?
Well, it matches our polling. I mean, we've gotten some preliminary polling back, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you, if you're a registered voter, to vote this year? We have 92% saying they're a 10. So people are ready to exercise their rights at the ballot box this year, which I think is good for Democrats. I mean, typically we see Republicans trying to depress turnout as a tactic because we know that when everybody shows up, Democrats do better.
Yeah, very high turnout, obviously, can have a partisan issue, but I also think that there are just really fundamental questions that a lot of voters are trying to answer at the ballot box. Like, how do we respond to a pandemic? Are we all in this together? Does government actually matter? And do we have expectations that it will be competent and not just a circus act? And I think, people are more focused in on the core competency of government than they have been in other years. And I think that's why, for example, you saw, some of the outcome in the Democratic primaries at the national level, because people are just looking for leadership that will actually just kind of get the job done and not be so ensnared in these partisan arguments all the time and these ideological battles.
Thanks.
Okay, next question is from Kevin Featherly. Last night's DFL primary results have been compared to the Tea Party wave in Congress. How do you read what happened? Do you anticipate having the same kind of trouble corralling the new folks that Paul Ryan and the gang had? And any thoughts on losing Dean and Lesh?
No, I don't think it is at all similar to the Tea Party. I think what we're seeing is not change that's driven by ideology. I think we're seeing change that's driven by demography. These seats don't belong to us. They belong to the people who live in the districts. And I think it's really important to the people of Minnesota to have a legislature that reflects all of the people who live in the state of Minnesota. And so I think that's what we saw last night. Representative Dean and Representative Lesh have both been really very strong progressives, very strong feminists. They were both beat by very competent women attorneys. I think we're going to wait and see on the absentee ballots in the Representative Dean's case before we make a final determination. But it's not a commentary on Representative Lesh or Representative Dean. This is a job interview process. And every single election, you have to make your case to the voters who have an opportunity to rehire you. And that they may have preferred a new candidate this go around, I don't think is at all says anything about the phenomenal progressive records that both of those gentlemen have.
And yeah, I would add that having a legislature that looks more like the state, and with the state's changing demographics, it's good that we are more representative than we were before. We've seen that I've seen that in my time as a legislator. As our House of Representatives has become more diverse, it has become much better at addressing issues that affect all Minnesotans, especially marginalized communities, Minnesotans of color. All of those kind of that lens that people bring changes our priorities in a critically important way. And for example, I don't think we would have been as successful with our police reform and accountability bill this summer if we didn't have a strong posse caucus presence within our caucus. So for me, yes, it can be challenging to bring people from different perspectives together, and it's not always perfectly smooth, but the outcome is much better. And I think the House DFL has done an outstanding job as a team coming together around issues and uniting, especially when it's important.
Okay, our next question is from Theo Keith. Theo, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, obviously you guys are losing, more than likely, losing 2 members, and Senator Kent is going to lose 2 members as well. Are you concerned that members are going to see this as a situation where voters are upset with incumbents, want to throw everybody out and start over? That obviously has ramifications for lots of incumbents if that's the case in voter finance.
I didn't hear all of it, but what I did hear was, do we read last night's results as a throw the bums out election? And not at all. What I saw was tremendous progressive energy. And I think that bodes extremely well for turnout in the general election.
And I would add, we've seen this trend happening for years, and it is communities organizing and electing people that come from their communities. And as communities change, the representatives change. That's how this happens. And it's inspiring. This is a new, in many cases, new Americans. This is marginalized people beginning to realize their power and exercise their power in important ways. And that is how Minnesota will succeed, is when more voices are at the table helping to shape decisions that will affect everybody. That is how we will succeed as a state. Being divided and having underrepresented groups not at the table is how we get to situations like we saw in Minneapolis this summer. That level of division and distrust will ruin us. We need to change, and part of these election results are realizing some of those changes.
All right, Peter Callahan, you're next.
Hi, I decided to use my video because you guys just look so lonely there surrounded by names. So governor's asking another $114 million in CARES Act money today. He asked 200 and some earlier. I'm asked staff to give me a running total, but there might be $150 million left there. Does the ledge need to do something to refill, say, that state account? Or are you gambling that the feds and Congress might actually send you some more money?
Well, I think 2 things I would say in answer to that. One is I do think that Congress will ultimately provide more relief to state governments. There are more Republican governors than Democratic governors in the country right now. And I think that Donald Trump will have to listen to them at some point and take some action. But when we look at how the federal CARES Act money is being spent, I have a lot of trust and faith in the administration that they are very carefully scrutinizing these spending decisions, knowing that we have that number 4.7 that we're potentially looking at in 22 and 23, but also knowing that the most important thing that we do in the state of Minnesota is to get this virus under control. And so that means keeping our teachers and our children safe in school. That means getting testing and contact tracing. So I think, I wouldn't speak for 100% of my caucus, but pretty nearly 100% of my caucus would say that we trust the decisions that the administration is making on these expenditures, and we're able to get additional information as we need it. I think you're seeing Representative Jim Dabney is having a hearing today about the $244 million that the governor's team has requested to help our educational institutions. So, we know that Republicans in the Minnesota Senate don't believe that we should have masking to control the spread of this virus. We know they don't believe in contact tracing. We know that they don't believe in the level of testing that science dictates is required. And so I am really heartened knowing that these decisions on these federal dollars are being made by this governor in conjunction with Democratic lawmakers.
Thanks.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so I think we'll give folks just a few more seconds.
Hey, Ted, can I just, sorry for not raising my hand, but can you guys give us just your wild guess on how today progresses time-wise, starting at noon?
Yes, I'm happy to tell you that because I've had some conversations about that with the other leaders. So the Senate will be taking up the day services bill first. I have asked that the Senate move at an expeditious pace to send us that bill. If they don't send it by 2 o'clock, then we'll move first. The House will go in at noon. We will take a recess at 12:15. We will take an hour to caucus with our members. And then we will come back at approximately 1:15. Hopefully by then, the Minnesota Senate will have sent us the day services bill so that we can send that over to them. We will, if we don't have the day services bill by then, we will take up a bill with some miscellaneous technical issues and send that over to the Senate. Then we will probably hold till we get to the day services bill, because what Senator Gazelka and I would like to get the work done before we turn to the debate on the resolution, which sometimes can get a little bit partisan and make people feel less like working together for the rest of the day. So then I would imagine probably by 4, hopefully sooner, we launch into should Governor Walz continue to have his peacetime emergency powers or not. And then that debate will take as long as the House Republicans would like that debate to take.
So yeah, basically smooth, efficient, transparent, and no bumps along the road, just like the legislature always operates.
We're making sausage. It's the same as it always is.
All right, couple more questions, and I think we'll be able to wrap up. Kevin Featherly asked, what about budget cuts? The judiciary is among the many agencies that are wondering how to move ahead in submitting budgets. What can you tell them?
Yeah, I have had extensive conversations with Commissioner Schnell and Commissioner Franz about those proposed Department of Corrections cuts and any other cuts that they might be considering due to the failure to pass a supplemental budget May, June, or July. And I have advocated strongly for postponing those budget cutting decisions into the next biennium, because they should be viewed in totality with the entire state budget, right? We know that there is a deficiency at the Department of Corrections, but does that mean of all the things we would contemplate cutting in state government, that this is the first place we would cut? We know there's a deficiency in direct care and treatment. Do we really think that this is the first place that we would turn to? And also, we haven't even had a revenue conversation or looking at other account balances in state government that could be moved around to forestall the cuts. So I would much rather that we pass the $58 million supplemental budget in September, and then that the legislature is much more fully engaged in any decisions to cut. I know that there's an argument that that's just postponing the inevitable, right? If we're looking at a $4.7 billion deficit in the future, why would we spend an additional $58 million on this year's budget? And I think it's because so much about the future is unknown. And we don't know if those are the places we would go first when we look at the totality of the state budget.
All right, I think last question here from Theo Keith. Any concern about losing Commissioner Franz during a budget crisis?
Well, I adore Commissioner Franz, and we've had a fantastic working relationship from my time as minority leader and even before then through now. But he is going to be replaced by another total powerhouse. Jim Showalter coming back to MMB is fantastic news for the the executive branch. It's fantastic news for the legislative branch. It's fantastic news for the state of Minnesota. I think we're all really looking forward to working with Jim again.
All right. And with that, I think we can wrap it up. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.